I'm Mark Golub, and there's so much happening in the news these days with the second round of peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, with chaos in Egypt and a rocket attack on Eilat, and the continuing scourge of anti-Semitism in Europe, including the attack on 2 Jewish girls in Zanzibar. So whom better to speak with about everything going on in the Jewish world today than a good friend and the executive vice chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, Malcolm Hoenlein. Malcolm, thank you for joining us again.
Oh, thank you for having me, but more importantly, thank you for being better and being back. We missed you greatly. You're an essential part of our community, and I look forward to seeing you every night on TV, in the middle of the night especially. So, refuah shalema, and really, chazak miyama.
Thank you very, very much, and I appreciate everything you do, both for the Jewish community and for me. Malcolm, I want you to choose. What's the number one issue of importance coming across your desk right now? And you're on the phone all the time, Malcolm. What do you feel is the ultimate issue of critical Jewish concern today?
I have to say there's such a melange of issues, domestic, international, national, that are coming up these days. You know, we met in Washington last week with the secretary, with White House officials, and the array of issues is really quite staggering. First and foremost, of course, is Iran. And we should not lose sight of it, despite of our concerns about what's happening in Egypt, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in North Africa, what's happening with Al-Qaeda, certainly what's happening in the Sinai and in Gaza. And, of course, the peace process in Israel is a major issue, but we should never lose sight that the defining issue is still Iran.
And where do you
nuclear
think
programs.
Where do you feel things stand now vis-a-vis Iran?
So there are two aspects to your question. One is the program, the nuclear weapons program, is advancing all the time. It's assumed that they've put in 7,000 new centrifuges since June, including 1,000 of the most advanced. We know that a new ballistic missile base was identified. We know that their plutonium enrichment facility has now been identified, even though, you know, we've been warning about it for some time, but at least the international community has taken note of it. We know that they're moving ahead all the time in advancing both the enrichment and the weaponization and the delivery systems. So on one level, they are using this hiatus and the fact that attention is diverted to advance their program. Then you had the election of Rouhani, who everybody calls moderate. You would think it's his first name. In fact, he's not a moderate. He is in keeping with the same line and tradition of Khamenei and his predecessors, except that he will do it in a more clever way, a more effective way. But his background, he wrote a book about his period as the nuclear negotiator, where he talks in derisive terms, where he says how he lied and obfuscated. He is someone who was involved in a decision to bomb the Argentinian Embassy of Israel and the Jewish Community Center. He was in an important position at the time and linked to the decision. He is somebody who was one of 7 approved out of a list of almost 700 by Khamenei. So he had to meet the ideological tests. So while he, can put a better face on it, there's nothing to indicate that there's a shift in policy. And while we would have welcomed a real change and somebody who really wants to turn a new page, well, he knows exactly what he has to do, and he hasn't done it.
You know, Malcolm, there is a sense that the world has sort of grown tired of the Iranian issue. Even in the Jewish world, there seems to be less and less talk about it. I'm assuming this troubles you.
It certainly troubles me that attention is diverted, and people's attention span, as you well know, especially people in media know, is probably a second or less, and that even the news cycle, which used to be 24 hours and then 12 and then 8 and 6 and 5, is a few seconds until the next story comes. The important thing here is that the Iranians are trying to wait us out. They believe that Americans have no patience. They want everything over in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, at most a mini-series. It's not the way the world works. And the Iranians are counting on the fact, and say this, that the West lacks will and determination. And they think they can finesse us. They think that they can continue the lies and delays until at one point they're going to announce, guys, it's too late. It's done. And believe me, that will be a game changer. And while we keep arguing that nobody wants to see a war, and the only way you're going to avoid a war is if they believe there are credible threats on the table, if they believe that the West has resolve. I can tell you I've been in many of the Arab countries and meeting with many Arab leaders here and there in the region. And all of them say that this is their great concern, and they don't have confidence that the West will act should it be necessary.
I know it's a sensitive question to ask you. You figure out how best to answer it. Where do you feel now the Obama administration is on the Iranian question?
Well, first of all, they have supported the sanctions. We are implementing new sanctions. Congress took the lead in another round of sanctions, which were passed by the House of Representatives by a 420 vote, including 106 of 131 members who signed a letter after Rouhani's election saying, well, it could be a new page, but they understand that, in fact, this is not a change, and that only tough sanctions, strictly enforced, strictly implemented, can make a difference, along with a belief by the Iranians that all options are on the table. When we took our aircraft carrier out of the Gulf for sequestration reasons, for budget reasons, they don't see it that way. They see it as a lessening the commitment that our presence, our power in the region is diminished. We have tremendous resources in the area. I do believe the president means it when he says Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. But the important thing is not what we say and what we believe, it's what they believe. It's their perception. And right now they see that European courts are diminishing some of the sanctions, that we see end runs around them. It's hurt them a lot. It will continue to hurt them. It's one of the ways to bring about change. But most of all, they have to believe we are serious and that we're going to see this through.
Is there something you'd like to hear President Obama or some European leader say unequivocally? Is there anything that could be said or done that would make you feel better about this issue?
Yes, an announcement that Iran's nuclear program is stopped and that we've taken out all their centrifuges. I think that there are statements, there are actions that can communicate in ways that the Iranians will understand the depth and sincerity of the commitment that I believe we do have. I think people, certainly the American people, have come to understand, and all the polls show this, the true nature of the danger, that it's not to Israel, it's to the United States. It's not just to the U.S., it's to Europe, it's to all the Arab countries. They get it. And what we have to do is to show them that we have the ability, the capability, and the resolve to do whatever is necessary to stop it. And that means using the IAEA, whose latest reports, the International Atomic Energy Agency reports, which condemn them, which show clearly how far advanced the program is, and admits that there are secret sites that we were not and may not be aware of. So there are actions and reactions that are essential. I would like to see our European allies do more in terms of enforcing the sanctions. I think that we could do more with the people inside Iran. We ought to shore up its neighbors, to stand with them, to defend them, countries like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and others that are facing challenges from Iran. And we have to demonstrate, both by our actions, our deeds, and by our support, that we mean it. Unfortunately, the events in Syria have undermined the West's credibility. Events in Egypt and elsewhere. While the Muslim Brotherhood's fall has been very positive and sent good ripples, the Iranians never had good relations, and so now Iran is exploiting it. And we have to know, and we have to educate people that Iran is not just a local problem. I just read about Mexican students who are being taken to Iran to be indoctrinated, to be trained, giving scholarships. We know that Iran is the fulcrum of the international terrorism network that goes across from Africa to Latin America to the United States. And the internal networks that are becoming more and more the focus of attention of Homeland Security, FBI here, and Canadian authorities. Just one issue, illicit cigarette smuggling, nets Iran's ally Hezbollah $1 billion a year from North America. Mm-hmm. And this is it's weapon smuggling, it's human smuggling, it's crimes of all kinds, counterfeiting drugs. It's such an intricate network, and they are at the core of it. So if we resolve Iran, we can resolve the Israeli-Palestinian issue. I think we can resolve the Syrian issue, many other things. people inverse it and say that if we solve these issues, we can then deal with Iran. You deal with Iran, believe me, the other issues become much more soluble.
All right, Malcolm, if Iran is number one, what's the number two issue that keeps coming across your desk?
Well, obviously, right now the focus is on the Israeli peace process with the Palestinians to see whether the Palestinians are really serious. Israel has undertaken a very painful and challenged decision, very unpopular in Israel, to release 104 prisoners, many of them with blood on their hands, others who were part of plots that killed Israelis. It's a very painful decision, especially because we know that many of them will be recidivists, that in the past many of those released came back and engaged in terrorism again. And there's also a report that some of them are Israeli Arabs, which would raise other political questions about whether the PA speaks on behalf of Israeli Arabs. But the Prime Minister made a decision based on his commitment to try to move this process forward, working with Secretary Kerry to at least test and see whether the Palestinian leadership is really prepared. You saw the statements that some of their leaders made just in the last 24 hours saying, we will never sign a final agreement. We're only going to make interim agreements. It's a hudna, meaning a temporary ceasefire, that we will never sign and make the concessions necessary for a final agreement. Well, that's a problem. That's been the problem all along, and why they kept passing up every other opportunity. Now they're being put to test to see whether they are ready now for peace or not. The other Arab countries have joined the effort, has been supportive of the effort to bring the two together and to incentivize them. They still only speak for half the Palestinians. They don't speak for the Gaza, obviously now, which is under Hamas control, which complicates it. But it's a test for Abbas, and one of the manifestations that has to be addressed is this continued incitement, the language, the glorifying of terrorists, which continues until today, despite their promises to end it and American pressure and Israeli pressure and demands that it stop, especially officially sanctioned incitement. So this is, I think, the second issue. Everybody wants to see peace. I think the formula for peace is clear. The question is working out the details. But more than that, it's the question of intent. Does the Palestinian leadership really want to reach a deal? Do they have the courage to do so? Will they be prepared to implement whatever decision, or again obfuscate as they have in the past and try to delay and extend it and push the onus onto Israel for any perceived wrongdoing?
Malcolm, answer a question that some of our viewers I know are asking based on the way in which the issue is being treated in the general media. Israel announced it would build 900 housing units in a community called Gilo, which is in East Jerusalem. Prior to that, there was an announcement by Housing Minister Uri Ariel about building new settlements, 1,000 settlements on the West Bank itself. And there are people who are suggesting, regardless of what the Palestinians do or do not really wish to do, does this not give a signal that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis are not really serious about peace if at this very moment they're making an announcement about new housing either on the West Bank or East Jerusalem, which is also part of the West Bank? What would you say to this criticism of the state of Israel right now?
Well, let's look at what it means on the ground. All of the construction that is announced, houses in Gilo. Gilo is part of Jerusalem today.
Yes.
It is East Jerusalem, but it's part of Jerusalem. It's part of Israel's capital. There are tens of thousands of people living there. The addition of 800 units is not a major expansion, but all of the expansion, all of the construction that was announced is within the existing footprints of communities that everyone agrees will remain with Israel. They talk about land swaps, they talk about territorial adjustment. Whatever solution is worked out, the places where this construction is taking place is by consensus areas that will remain with Israel. So I don't think that this in any way needs to upset the negotiations. It doesn't create definitive facts on the ground. And second of all, Israel has said that they're in a real peace agreement, that there may be communities that would be uprooted, there would have to be moved, there were adjustments that would be made. That's what negotiations are about, to provide housing for people, for families that are expanding, for communities can't remain static for long periods of time. You either build or you die. And in this case, a lot of the construction that they're talking about will not take place for years. If you remember all the controversy about E1, has one brick been put in E1? Does anybody even know where it is? No, but the whole world rose in indignation because of E1. E1 is an important land bridge between a city of 30,000, Ma'ale Adumim, and Jerusalem. We went to visit it with the President's Conference, and everyone walked away saying, I get it now, I see. And no one lived there, and no one has ever lived there. It's not usurping land. But the fact is that many of these announcements are about zoning decisions or commitments or permission to build, but it doesn't mean that construction is actually beginning.
Talk to me now about unrest in Egypt, especially as it seems to have impact on the state of Israel. And Malcolm, there was this, Al-Qaeda takes responsibility for launching a rocket against Eilat. It's the first time there was ever a rocket against, a resort community. The rocket was taken down by the Iron Dome, which was the first major success in this type of scenario. But what do you feel the unrest and chaos in Egypt means for Israel?
Well, it means a great deal, and certainly Egypt being the most important Arab country, I've visited there several times since Mubarak fell, and have a pretty good understanding. And as much as you think it's far more complicated. The battle today on the streets of Egypt for Morsi, against Morsi, for the government, against the government. It's obviously a bloody situation, and with very severe implications. Egypt's stability is vital for the region. It's vital for North Africa. The defeat of the Muslim Brotherhood, their removal, has had important repercussions in other countries where they have had electoral victories. But the most important issue is stability, and it starts with the economy. 50% of the people in Egypt make less than $2 a day. The country is marginal in its reserves and in every other area. So it needs stability. It needs to come together and to rebuild their economy. Then you have two other factors. One is Gaza, which under Morsi, the Hamas felt that they had a sympathetic leader and expanded their activities. And now, in fact, they've closed a lot of the tunnels. They have acted against Hamas because they began to realize that this is a two-way street, these tunnels, and they go against Egypt and works against Egypt's interests, both economically, politically, and security-wise. The biggest threat that has emerged of late is Sinai, where you have large numbers of al-Qaeda. You have Bedouin Salafists, Bedouin tribes that have become radicalized from influence from Gaza and elsewhere. You have various Islamic jihad groups. They have challenged the military every night. There are attacks against police or military installations there. And there's been a flow of weapons from Libya, much of it intended for Gaza, and some of it stayed in Sinai, or other weapons that came from the Sudan, from Libya, from Iran, two groups there. And some of them are more sophisticated, as the rockets we saw. It's not the first time rockets were fired at Eilat. They were fired from Gaza, but it's been rare that they've been fired from the Sinai, although it has happened. And thank God the Iron Dome intercepted it and took it out. But it is a challenge, and it's meant to draw perhaps Israeli fire onto Sinai, which Israel's reluctant to do because it's governed by Egypt and the Egyptian army, and they don't want to, endanger the Egyptian army, nor challenge Egypt's sovereignty there. So they are very hesitant about responding, but obviously can't let this lawlessness impact the security and safety of its citizens. Mm-hmm. The situation in Sinai is one that very much worries the military. Israel allowed them to bring in many brigades. There were attempts to blow up bridges across the Suez Canal, which they were able to prevent, but there's been quite a few killings, and the army has acted against some of them, but there are thousands of these terrorists, and they've hardly made a dent. And this is really become a wild no man's land with little authority, and it'll be a staging ground against Egypt, against Israel, against Saudi Arabia, against Jordan, and will further destabilize a already unstable region.
Yes, and the point you make, I hope our viewers understand this. Everybody talks about, will the peace between Egypt and Israel hold? You're saying it's much more subtle than that, and that you have in the Sinai, in essence, a third entity which could create military terrorist havoc both for Israel and even for Egypt. And Israel, you're saying to us, is concerned about the future in terms of the Sinai itself.
Absolutely, and constrained about it. But so the United States, others are also, I think, concerned, or certainly should be. I know that many of the Arab countries are. The Egyptian army has made an effort, but at a time when they have their troops demanded inside the country and to extend their reach into the Sinai, so they can only send limited numbers. Although, as I said, they've sent in I think 10 or 11 battalions and tanks with them with Israel's permission. The fact is that the military security cooperation between Israel and Egypt is excellent today. And it was even during Morsi, because it's in their common interest. A Gaza gone wild does not help even a Muslim Brotherhood regime. Sinai becoming this wild land of terrorism does not help Egypt, let alone Israel or anyone else. So the military and security cooperation has been and is today very good.
I want you to talk for one moment about the threat of, in general, Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, Islamism. And we just saw the United States close down embassies throughout Africa and the Middle East. Does it say anything to you that frightens you for the state of Israel?
It frightens me for the region, and it frightens me for the state of Israel, and it frightens me for the United States, because we are still the great devil, and a lot of their activities, as we saw in 9/11 and other times, are directed at American interests, America, our allies, and the things we care about, the values that we care about. So I am very concerned. I think the closing of the embassies was the right thing, given the nature of the warning as reported, and I think you have to take prophylactic measures. At the same time, you cannot succumb to terrorism. They have to see, and the only language they understand is strength, is that we act out of strength, that we do what's necessary to root out this scourge of terrorism. That means going to those who aid and abet it. It means those who arm it. It means taking out the weapons depots. It means going after the leadership. We are seeing this increasing radicalization. It's one of the dangers, by the way, from Syria. You have hundreds and hundreds of people who have come from Europe, England, France, Italy, 80, Ireland, a couple hundred, who have gone to fight in Syria. They go for whatever radical initiative, but they come back as jihadists. Mm-hmm. And they will bring home that message. And you don't need thousands to start carrying out terrorism and to disrupt the countries. And I know it's a matter of great concern to many of the leaders that these people are going there, being trained and indoctrinated, and will go back to their countries as full-fledged jihadists, and will give expression to that. This is not something you're going to be able to, Genie, you're going to put back in the bottle.
Yes. So talk for one more moment about the issue of anti-Semitism in Europe. And again, I referred to at the top of the program that in Zanzibar, 2 British Jewish girls who were volunteering in a school were attacked by a local Muslim. They were targeted simply because they were Jewish. Take 60 seconds and talk about how you feel about the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe and as it spreads across the world.
I am very concerned. I'm not an alarmist when it comes to this, but I am somebody who has sounded the alarm for a long time about the inevitable situation, just given the demographics in Europe. But what we are seeing, combined with the growth of the Muslim communities and radicalization of their young people, because it's not the Muslims per se, it's those who have been indoctrinated in this extremist ideologies, and many, in fact, some of the young people fighting in Syria cited the killing of the Jews in Toulouse. French young people cited the killing of the Jews in Toulouse as the motivation for them to go and fight in Syria. The growing campaign of delegitimization, I would say, is the third issue on my table, and not just in regard to anti-Semitism. Delegitimization is the 21st century's legitimate expression of anti-Semitism, acceptable one, because you target the collective Jews, the corporate Jew, i.e. the state of Israel. So you can't say, I hate Jews everywhere, but you can't say, I hate Israel, and get away with it.
Yes.
And we see these campaigns of delegitimization, denying Israel its standing, its rights, which is, in fact, to deny Jews their rights and their standing. And it's being manifested in every sector, when entertainers boycott, when cultural figures in unions, labor, church groups, and it's based on misinformation and disinformation. It's based on racism and hatred. And when the governments then endorse it by the kind of resolution they took about the West Bank products, cutting off anybody who has an installation, a university, a clinic in the West Bank, can't get funds from the EU foundation, EU fund, which is primarily for research and related activities. This exacerbates it. It gives the official hechsher to it, and is even more unacceptable. We know that it starts with Jews but never ends with them.
Yes.
This growth of anti-Semitism, the rise of parties in Hungary, Greece, and elsewhere, should be an alarm. This is what never again means. It's a pledge we take, never again to be silent, never to ignore, never to turn away from these realities, but to act whether Jews or non-Jews are the targets. And it's why we speak out about the Christians from Indonesia to Iran to Iraq to Egypt who are now being persecuted, that it is unacceptable, and when the world is indifferent to one group, it'll be indifferent to all.
It is wonderful to have an opportunity for you to share perspective with the Shalom TV viewing audience. There's no one like you. By the way, without embarrassing you, something very nice happened to you in all places in Morocco. What happened, Malcolm?
Well, I've really had a tremendous run the last month for reasons I don't know how it came, but I was honored at the Christians United for Israel with their Defender of Israel Award in Washington at their national convention, and last week was inducted as a brother of AEPI, but in between, I received an honor from the King of Morocco, a surprise, actually, which I only found out a couple days before, and we went there and for a huge ceremony on their national day. The king presented me with the high civilian award given to a foreigner, and I told him it was an honor to receive it, but even more of an honor to be a friend of Morocco. And it's true, Morocco is a great ally, a great friend. The Jewish community there has a tremendous history, and while the numbers are greatly diminished, the institutions still function. The king personally acts as a protector of the Jews. And while the Muslim Brotherhood won an election, they're certainly not that popular, and my getting an award was not very popular with them.
Right. Well, kol hakavod to you. It is well-deserved. Every one of the awards you get, again, you are an exceptional leader on the American Jewish scene. And very soon, the Conference of Presidents will be celebrating its 50th anniversary with a dinner, yes?
Absolutely, and I hope everybody will come. It's going to be at the Waldorf Astoria on October 15th. It'll mark our 50th anniversary. It's 20 years since our last dinner. Hopefully it'll be 20 years to our next dinner. And we are honoring all the past chairmen, amazing people like Mort Zuckerman, Jim Tisch, Ron Lauder, Richard Stone, Harold Tanner, Alan Solo, June Walker, and Mel Salberg. And it'll be an opportunity to thank them all for the incredible work they've done.
And you will be honored also. Kol hakavod, I wish you, as always. First of all, we're just about to have the high holidays so early this year. I wish you L'Shana Tova, Mituka. May you have a sweet, happy new year, and may we have the chance to speak very often, Malcolm. Thank you for the time.
God willing, and again, stay well. We need you, and thank you for the great service. You entertain me when I work late at night, so I really appreciate Shalom TV even more.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Be well.
Be well. The thoughts of Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. And I hope Malcolm has helped put some of the issues confronting Jewish life today into sharper focus for you. My thanks, as always, to those who helped produce this program, Sloan Copeland, Serge Goldberg, Ilya Arbit, and our producer for this edition of In the News, Alan Orich. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.